Welcome to the first episode of Israel Snapshot, the mystery of Masada, a short series of 20-minute tours about the mysteries of the history of the land of Israel. I hope you enjoy this, I hope you like this video, and I hope that you will subscribe to Museum Tours Israel on YouTube and to the mailing list on Museum Tours COIL, and hopefully I'll see you on the next tour in real time. Enjoy the tour. Welcome everyone to the very first Israel Snapshot short series of Mysteries of the Land of Israel. A short series which is designed to enhance your visit to Israel. Some of you are local, so it's giving something a little bit new about a very famous site, the site of Masada. And for those of you who are hopefully coming to Israel soon, this will be something to enhance and enrich your visit. So it's something when you go to these sites, you'll have a little bit extra to look into, a few questions to ask, and you'll be able to see that there's a connection between the ancient site and modern history in very interesting ways. So let me just share the screen and let's get started. So our story is the story of Masada. I chose to start this series with Masada because Masada is such a famous site now. It's a staple in every birthright trip. It's basically the place that people talk about in terms of the response to the Holocaust. They say, Masada shenit lo tipol, it won't fall again, and so too Am Yisrael won't go through another Holocaust. It's a very loaded site. People go there for bar mitzvahs, and people go there for swearing into the army. It's a very important site in contemporary Israeli history. And what I'd like to do is to show you in 20 minutes that the site has much more than meets the eye. And the fact that it's become so famous actually goes back to a pre-World War I story, or actually around World War I. So it goes back to something which relates to World War I and pogroms in Eastern Europe. And it's much more surprising than that. And it's also controversial, but there's also some innovation that's happening that has to do with the real story behind the scene. So this is an overview of the various places we're going to look at, from Masada National Park in the south to Kibbutz Masada in the north, which is somehow related to this. So lots of exciting stuff. Let's get started with the Israel Museum. So our story begins with the builder of Masada. The builder of Masada, 2,050 years ago, around the year 31 BCE, is Herod the Great. Herod the Great, who built up the city of Yerushalayim and the temple in Jerusalem to be a temple which rivals the greatest temples in the Roman world. Chazal tell us, our tradition says, that whoever has not seen the building of Herod has not seen a beautiful building in his life. This is definitely a milestone in Jewish history, the Herodian period, the period of Herod the Great, which eventually ends with the Roman destruction of Jerusalem, but it's a very important period in terms of Jerusalem's glory. And one of the things which Herod did was build a series of fortresses around the different borders of the country with palaces and protection layers. But it's also a place that has luxurious elements of the Roman world. So to show some of these elements, I want to take us to inside the Israel Museum, to a place which showcases what we're going to see fully when we get to Masada. So King Herod, welcome to the Israel Museum. I'm sure some of you have been here with me before. Just let Moshe back in. Okay, I just paused for a moment so Moshe can get back in. All right, so the Herodian period. I'm going to start off in the Israel Museum, and we are looking at a remnant of the Herodian period from Masada. This is part of a bathhouse. I'll show you some more pictures from Wikipedia. There's a whole wide range of photographs, but this is a Roman bathhouse with painting. There are these special tiles for the steam. Now, I want you to think about it like this. Herod is trying to show off and to boast of his building capacity, his building capabilities, his innovation, and to really impress all of these international dignitaries who are coming to visit him and to see this kingdom of Judea. How best to impress Roman people? A bathhouse. Take him to the bath. It's the sweat house, the bathhouse. This is what Romans do. They sit in public bathhouse, and it's very fancy. the Roman bathhouse that Herod built was in the desert. You're talking about the Judean desert. You're right next to the Dead Sea. And he was able to bring in so much water that he was able to run a bathhouse, to run farms there where he grew. We know this we know this based on recent excavations by Tel Aviv University. They found small little vines that are curved and twisted in a certain way that shows you that they were made to be like bonsai trees, very small trees. I think that they were like apple trees maybe, and some other tree. And they were given presumably as gifts to dignitaries as a souvenir from the desert. So he really showed off, right? And there's also incredible storehouses there and enough water to sustain a 3-year siege. So this is the Herodian period. This is just a small part of the Herodian period. There's storage vessels. There's an anchor that was found at the bottom of the Dead Sea. So he traveled in boats across the Dead Sea. There's a lot to talk about in terms of the Herodian period. It's a very good period in terms of the history of the land of Israel. Okay, so that is in the museum. Now let's go to the actual site. All right, welcome to Masada. This is Masada, the palace which Herod built on the border of the desert right by the Dead Sea. The sea was actually much closer to where the palace is standing right here. So you can imagine it's like having your house in Deal or Florida or Netanya on the beach. You're looking at the beach from the palace. This is your view, an incredible view of the Dead Sea. Now, Masada itself, besides being a beautiful location and a strategic location, also has an incredible amount of things that have been found. So when you come to Masada next time, I encourage you, before going up to the snake path, or the cable car into Masada, I would like to show you that there's a tourist center here below. And in that tourist center, there is a museum that many people skip and ignore. So we're inside the tourist center. This is where you drive in, where you park. And there is a small model here in the center of the hills of Masada. We're going to look at that from outside in just a moment. But right off to the side here, blocked by these people, is an entrance to a museum. And this museum is a museum. They have an audio guide in several languages. It's about a half hour. It's well worth it. And I took a whole bunch of pictures there so that you can see them. So I'm going to take you to some of these pictures. I was there a couple years ago. And I want to show you some of the things that you see in here. An assortment of vessels. All the way on the bottom here is a huge vessel for storage of wine, of drinks. And this you could comfortably fit inside this vessel. It's huge. And a lot of these were stamped with seals that tell you where they came from. They transported even like a fish juice, a stinky fish juice from Spain, but it's an important ingredient in Roman cuisine. And nothing should be spared when showing off your luxury and your wealth. So Herod the Great really knew how to put on a party. And the audio guide in this museum really does it justice by getting you into the mood with the sounds of people talking and clinking of glasses and music and narration. It's a very well done museum, very enjoyable. So this is just a small part of what you can see in the museum. Now, Masada itself was also destroyed, as we know, by the Romans. We're going to talk about the destruction in just a moment, but they're sling stones from the destruction. I also want to show you, hang on, just to get an idea of the place. This is by drone. This is on YouTube. There's some beautiful pictures here. And there's palaces on the north side. There's a synagogue that was found here, many storage rooms, gardens, several other things that have been found. Now, this was excavated in 1963 by the famous archaeology Yigal Yadin. Yigal Yadin said that 95% of Masada has been excavated. In other words, he thinks it's all been discovered. So on national television, Professor Guy Stiebel of Tel Aviv University, who's excavating there, wanted to, of course, give Yigal Yadin respect where respect is due. And instead of saying he was wrong, he said, He was an excellent archaeologist, but he wasn't so good at math because there is so much more that has been discovered in Masada since that period of time. So let's hop up to the top of the mountain. Where is it taking us? Oh, sorry, taking us to the wrong place. Back in time. Here we go. Just want to show you one detail. Here we go. So just one detail here from Masada is just looking around, of course, getting in the view. Many different storage rooms, and you get the idea that you are surrounded by a ravine in every direction. So you are basically impenetrable. This is a very powerful defense, as well as a luxurious palace where you can bring in a lot of people and show off. So this is Masada. Now, why is Masada famous? Masada, first of all, is famous because of the primary source which talks about Masada, and that is Josephus Flavius in the Wars of the Jews. So he talks about how it fell. And what he tells us about Masada, a few important things. Number one, he talks about there were about 1,000 people there. And the famous story that these people who were hiding out there from the Romans around, we're talking 4 years after the destruction of the Second Temple, they are still holding their own against the Romans. And the Romans bring in the 10th Legion and come to destroy them. Okay, that's the story that we are told. And rather than fall victim to the Romans and to the tortures of being humiliated and being sold into slavery, they would rather die, and they killed themselves. And several people who were sent out, were men who divorced their wives in order that they won't be stuck here. That divorce set them free and saved their lives. Like, those are the kind of stories they tell. But that is the only written document that we have that describes Masada. What does archaeology actually tell us? Well, I want to show you a few different things. First of all, this is just on the Wikipedia page. There were excavations there again in the 1960s that found several different things. They found a synagogue and palaces and even things from the lottery. There's our bathhouse, by the way. Some paintings. Just going through it. And they found 30-some skeletons, 30-some bodies, which apparently were buried in proper burial. So in 1979, there was a special ceremony for burying them in a Jewish cemetery. So what happened to all the others? Weren't there about 1,000 of them? Didn't they all commit suicide? So we have the story of Josephus. And then we have the actual finds which don't seem to support it. In addition to that, we have the famous story of their committing suicide. This is just a picture of people climbing up Masada. But there's the story of the committing suicide. We actually found in the museum these lots. I'll show them to you. We found these lots with names. So this one says Yoav on a shirt. This one says Choni. And this one says Ben Yair. And Ben Yair, according to Josephus, was the leader of these fighters who were in Masada. Now, according to Josephus, they all decided to commit suicide rather than fall to the hands of the Romans. So the question is, how do we know the story? So Reuven Gafni and some other, Yeshayahu Gafni and some other historians say that it's very clear in typical Roman period of the time, that the whole speech that Ben Yair said before everybody commits suicide is the speech that should have been said had it been said. Not that it actually was said. We don't really know what happened, and we have a lot of reasons to suspect that the version of the story is not an accurate one, and it's one that makes these people look bad, and it makes the Romans look good. Remember that Josephus actually knew these people, probably even personally. He interacted with them. He knew their names. He was communicating with them on behalf of the Roman Empire. So he knows who these people are. And what he tells us about these people is that they are Sicarii. Sicarii, the people of the knife, are a sect of radical nationalist Jews in the time of the Second Temple who were saying, we shall not make peace with the Romans. And any Jew who was suspected of collaborating with the Romans or trying to make peace with them was killed. These are not people who the modern day, let's say, rabbinic or Jewish or religious Jew would want to have a lot to do with. and yet we go and celebrate bar mitzvahs there. It's a very curious phenomena. So this is the overview of Masada. It's a site that was destroyed by the Romans in retaliation to these people, these zealots, who the rabbis probably would not have supported, and yet they became the icon for the survival of Judaism and the fighting Jew. So I want to take us into that story and what exactly is that based on. So the first thing I want to introduce to you is that there's a famous line, which is Masadah shenit lo tipol. Masada will not fall again. Where does that line come from? It actually comes from a poem written by Yitzhak Lamdan in 1920 after World War I in response to the pogroms on the Jews in Eastern Europe and to the various tragedies we have suffered. And he connects together various events in Eastern Europe, and etc. And this has been continued by other writers as well. So there's a whole book that he put out there. I mean, there's a whole poem that he wrote about Shalshelet HaDorot, the chain of the generations, which was then added onto, like we're looking at here. They added Warsa on it, Mimigine. This says, from the guardians of Masada, till the protectors of Tel Chai with Trumpeldor, from the Meginim of Masada till the fighters of Warsaw, from the protectors of the walls of Jerusalem until the guardians of the soldiers of Israel. Today, it's one chain. It's taking these words of this song by Yitzhak Lamdan called Masada, based on Josephus Flavius before the excavations ever happened in the 1960s. This is in the British Mandate. This line is coming to say we need to stand tall as Jews and not to fall, but it has nothing to do with the Holocaust and the state of Israel at the time those words were said. Now, because of this poem called Masadah by Yitzhak Lamdan, there was a kibbutz founded in Israel's north. And that kibbutz's name is Kibbutz Masada. I want to take you there so you see what it is. Because if you're in Israel and you're putting this in your GPS, you want to make sure you're going to Masada National Park and not the Kibbutz Masada, even though Google Earth gives you here a picture of Masada National Park. It's incorrect. It's near the Kinneret. This is a kibbutz in Israel. And the kibbutz was founded based on this poem, Masada, from where we have the verse, Mitzadah shenit lo tipol. Masada will not fall again, which has then been taken by the state of Israel. So why was it taken by the state of Israel? What is this all about? This is because the modern state of Israel, and in fact, modern Zionism, looked at Jewish history for the image of the fighting Jew as opposed to the exilic Jew, which was a big concept back in the day, which is why the Warsaw upheaval, the Warsaw Revolt is such a big deal, even though it ended up being a failure. But that's because it's the image of the fighting Jew versus the Jew who goes, and the famous trope is like sheep to the slaughter, which is, of course, very inaccurate. I mean, the Death March was just the same thing. We had fighting American soldiers, but when you have guns pointed at you, you do exactly what everybody else does. But the idea of the Jew in exile was looked upon so negatively, in such a negative light, that they wanted to take something more positive, which represented these modern Zionist values, which is the fighting Jew, which is why, for example, the Bezalel Art School took the coins of Bar Kokhba, the coins of the Great Revolt, the coins of the Hasmoneans, and used them in their art, in the old menorahs of Bezalel Art School, which is way before the state of Israel. And they used them to talk about the standing fighting Jew, the Sabra with his hands with prickles in his hands from working the land, the agricultural Jew. And a lot of this also, if you know Soviet art, it takes like very Soviet images, and that's the kibbutznik. Right? Like they really took those images of what they saw as the builder, the pioneering Jew. And one of those symbols was Masada. So Masada became the symbol of fighting, even though in terms of Jewish tradition, that was, first of all, these people were doing the wrong thing by fighting against the Romans and killing their own, and also committing suicide, if it even happened, wasn't really such a good idea. I would like to wrap this up with what really happened with Masada and why were the Romans fighting Masada. And that takes us to the city of Ein Gedi. Ein Gedi, which is north of Masada by the Dead Sea, the beautiful kibbutz, resort, saunas, and there's an ancient synagogue from the 6th century, from the Byzantine period here in Ein Gedi. And I'll take you inside to an image of the synagogue. Here's some of the mosaics of the synagogue. And there is a very famous mosaic in the center of the synagogue, which says on it, there's a whole lot of things that it says, but it also says, cursed be those people who tell the Gentiles the secret of the city. What is the secret of the city, and why bother making that written on the floor of the synagogue that everybody is seeing when they walk in? There are those who have suggested, and this is probably incorrect, but it's a good plug for getting to the last point, is that it's the secret of the production of a special perfume, which the city of En Gedi were famous for. It's historically inaccurate to say that this was the secret in the Byzantine period, but we are talking about the balsam. The balsam is the real reason that the Romans spent basically millions in order to kill these people in Masada. What was going on in Masada? The zealots who were hiding out in Masada were hiding out, but going out and sabotaging the fields of a plant called the balsam plant. What is the balsam plant? The balsam is called in Hebrew afarsimon or abalzimon or bosem, is a very particular type of perfume made from a plant extract, like a sap. And it was the most expensive perfume in the entire Roman Empire. It was used for medicinal purposes as well as for perfume, but it was such an expensive manufacturing, and it was only produced in Ein Gedi. And because these zealots were causing millions of dollars in damage to the Roman Empire, it was worth it for the Roman Empire to send the 10th Legion to kill the people in Masada because they were ruining the production of perfume, of balsam. That's the real story of why they fought against them. And on that note, I want to take you to a place which is near Ein Gedi. There's a balsam farm, and it's right off the beaten path on the way to Jericho. You see, we're here. And 10 minutes away, not even 10 minutes, there is a field. I want to take you there, where there's this French Jew who took all of his savings and invested in recreating the balsam. So there's a video about him here. I'll show him just in a few moments. I'm happy to link. But look, so there's a video about it. I'm happy to share it with you. And this person, with using all kinds of new technologies and studying the ancient, takes this plant and creates this. The plant has this secretion, and in this ecological garden, he recreates the balsam, the abalzimon, the afarsimon, which was the most expensive perfume in the Roman world, and the casus belli, the reason that the Roman Empire invested in destroying Masada. It's really about that. If you want to check him out, of course, there's a website here. You can go and visit this place. It's an attraction. It's a great place to see. They have other things going on as well. I think this is available in English as well. There you go. Guy Ehrlich, this is the guy, and it's a great place to visit. So that was the story. That is the story of Masada, really short in a nutshell. But a small city which is so important in modern Israeli history, and yet it's more than meets the eye, and it's not really the story that's generally told. The valor of the people of Masada is a part of the modern Zionist movement, but what really happened there is very different than the story that we selectively talk about, and it really has to do with perfume and with economics. So I thought that was a fascinating story. Next week, same time, same place, a different topic. I'm going to announce it shortly. I'm going to just stop the recording here.